Welcome to Quills and Cloaks, a writing and fandom podcast, delving into the world of fandom discussions, author writing tips, and of course, all things Harry Potter. I'm Christy J. Whitney, and I will be your host and your professor. So unroll those parchments because class is in session. All right, welcome to Quills and Cloaks, episode 6, and I am extremely excited today to have and to interview two very special people in the world of the Harry Potter fan film realm, and that would be Justin Zagri and Alexander Arntzen. So thank you guys for being here with me today.
Thank you, Christy.
So just as a matter of kind of introductions for those of my listeners that are not familiar with these two talented artists. So Justin Zagri is a filmmaker, director, writer of many projects outside of the Harry Potter world, but within the fandom, certainly known for the short films The Greater Good and Severus Snape and the Marauders, which premiered on the YouTube channel Broad Strokes Productions in 2016. And I believe won Best Fan Film and Best of Fest at Geek Fest 2018. And has also been reviewed by Entertainment Weekly, BuzzFeed, among many others. And then also is currently working on the radio drama, The Great Wizarding War, which as we are recording this podcast, I believe is up through episode 9 of 12. That's correct. And then we have Alexander Arntzen, and he is an award-winning film composer and singer-songwriter in many mediums, also does original music for feature films, has quite an impressive resume, and he composed the music for both Severus Snape and the Marauders and The Great Wizarding War. So first of all, because this is the Harry Potter fandom part of my podcast, I would like to ask you both, what is your Hogwarts house? And do you have a favorite character from the book series or a favorite film in the series? So we'll start with you, Justin.
Well, first of all, Christy, you are on point. My goodness, I was so surprised by everything from all the details you have as to getting my last name right. Nobody does that, so thank you.
You're welcome.
My Hogwarts house is a Gryffindor. My favorite book is The Goblet of Fire, and my favorite movie is The Order of the Phoenix.
Oh, excellent ones. Awesome. And how about you, Alex?
Yeah, my house is Slytherin, surprisingly.
Yes.
And
Not surprisingly.
and I would say my favorite book is probably Order of the Phoenix, and favorite movie was like Prisoners of Azkaban.
Yes, excellent one, which I am currently reading out loud to my English classes right now. So apologize if my voice sounds a little shot, but we've been reading chapters out loud all day long in my English classes. So before we begin, and proud Slytherin, if you can't tell from the Cursed Child shirt that I'm wearing, but before we begin, I do want to say that we're going to talk a lot about Severus Snape and the Marauders a little bit later on in the podcast, and it is hands down my favorite fan-related story, really of anything that I've seen or read in the Harry Potter universe. And I love how well developed the characters were, and even beyond what we already knew about them in canon from the book series. But one thing that really captured me was the music in Severus Snape and the Marauders. So I love film scores, and as a writer, I always have an inspirational playlist that I usually have in the background when I'm doing projects. And for years, the last 2 years, it's been from Cursed Child, Imogen Heap's wonderful score from Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, but then also in the last 2 years from Severus Snape and the Marauders. So I've always got that playing for inspiration. And really, it's the music from the fan film that actually started this whole interview. So I don't know, well, I didn't tell you this, I don't think, Alex, but my son, who's a senior in high school, he plays the cello in his orchestra, and we're both big Harry Potter fans and love Severus Snape and the Marauders and the music. So one day, unbeknownst to me, he emailed you, and he was asking if there was an orchestration available for the score. And you very quickly just sent that to him and replied to him, which really impressed me. I think completely blew him away. And fast forward to now, I thought, I'm doing this podcast. I want to use some music for the intro of my podcast. and I really love Severus Snape and the Marauders. So I just thought I'll reach out to you because you just seemed like you were very open and very willing to kind of share. And one thing led to another. And now I've got you guys both here for this interview. So I want to say thank you for just being so collaborative and just being so open with sharing your music and your talents with, you know, just curious and very interested people like my son, who just was really impressed with the score.
No, absolutely. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I would say of all my scores, like this one has been the one that is like literally reached around the world. It's been quite astonishing, actually, how many people around the world have commented to me from Italy and all sorts of other countries, just like thanking me for, you know, I guess creating the music. But yeah, it was a pleasure to help them out and just to spread the music around.
That is so awesome. So I appreciate both of you being so collaborative and willing to share your story and parts of your journey, which I know is an encouragement to a lot of other people who are pursuing similar paths. So without further ado, let's get to some questions that I had for you guys, both in just storytelling, then also we'll talk specifically about Snape and the Marauders and Wizarding War. But first and foremost, I would love to know, how did the two of you meet and ultimately end up coming to work together on Severus Snape and the Marauders?
I mean, Alex has been my only composer for everything I've made since college. So that's how we've come to work on Snape and the Marauders. But we met because he put up like a little business card on a bulletin board at my college. And I checked out his website and liked his music and asked if he'd be interested in scoring one of the films I was making. And he did an amazing job, and he kept doing an amazing job every time we worked on something. So the reason why I say it's not surprising he's a Slytherin is because he's a go-getter. He's very ambitious, and he pushes himself to get out there, to get noticed, and it's paid off for him big time. But he also has a really nice pool, so I like hanging out there a lot.
I know we can't do it this year. Hopefully next year.
I think I remember in a interview that I listened with the two of you that, Alex, you had cards posted up in a college that he saw, like with your services.
That was I think the Wizarding Award talks back. That was sort of the same story. Yeah, I had literally, like, one of my dad's clients. My dad like does taxes for people in the entertainment business, and one of his clients was a teacher at Columbia College, and he just like offered, well, you know, if you want, like, print out some stuff, I can just put them around some bulletin boards, and he did, I guess. And Justin, fortunate enough to contact me, and yeah, we've just been working ever since. Like I think I finished scoring his first short film together when I was in college in Boston, actually, and I was literally scoring it on like a keyboard this big, like a 2-octave keyboard, and a laptop, the laptop Berkeley gave us. And yeah, it was. I mean, I was doing like pitch bending and all sorts of. I was trying to do as much as I could with as little as I had, and it seemed to get pulled off decently. And so yeah, we've worked together ever since, which has been fun.
That's an amazing collaboration, and that you guys work so well together. So kind of leading into the second question, so Severus Snape and the Marauders, the focus, one of the things that drew me to this film is that the focus is on these characters after graduation, but before the war really gets started in the Harry Potter universe. So there's so much we don't know about them, but yet there's so many rich moments in the book that I think really plant in our minds an idea of where these characters could have gone after graduation, but still a lot of research and digging to be done. So Justin, what kind of research did you have to do in preparation for writing Snape and the Marauders?
I mean, I read all the books again. I think that's the third time I read them. The second time I read through the books was for research for the greater good. But basically, I just looked for any moments that talked about James Potter, Lily, and Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, Remus, and paid close attention to Severus Snape, particularly his interest or disinterest, not disinterest, but pretty large loathing for Harry, to better understand where that came from. As well as an understanding as to his feelings about Lily. And the initial idea for Snape and the Marauders, because I put out a poll for the fans, and with a bunch of different options, and the biggest one by far was the Marauders. So when I looked up the characters and got to know more about them, as well as Snape, something stuck out to me as to in the end of the seventh book with the prince's chapter is called The Prince's Memory or something like that. But he basically has a moment where he tries poorly to apologize to Lily for calling her a mudblood. And I just feel that I felt a little inspired by that little moment, and said, what if he, and asked myself, what if he tried again? But this time right after school ended. And then what's going on right after school ended? Well, there's a war, and it might be escalating like this. There's been disappearances and craziness happening throughout their tenure at school, but now it's really ramping up, and now that they're leaving high school or leaving Hogwarts, they know they're probably going to join that war, all of them. So Snape sees this as a last-ditch attempt to make amends with this girl he's known his whole life and was in love with. And the Marauders, when they're celebrating and then contemplating about this war, they see Snape, and James Potter, who is talked about as kind of a hero and a good guy, but also is revealed to be a very big bully and quite arrogant, was described as getting better as he grew up. And I kind of wanted to explore that as to how he was getting better, but through seeing that Snape was in the bar, and he knew Snape was probably going to join a very dangerous group, and he felt threatened by him, both for his friends, but more selfishly for his relationship with Lily. I thought this was the perfect opportunity for them to have a final confrontation with the gloves off, no school to get in their way. So that was kind of the idea, is to figure out what's their motivations for seeing each other. And also, from a practical point of view, getting them all in uniform and into college and into school was very difficult. So it just made practical sense to get them out of school, out of uniform, and it just makes for more interesting storytelling once they're out of school, and then have to start making adult choices in a world full of war.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we will definitely, when we discuss characters a little bit later on, I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit more as far as the Marauders and Snape. But, coming from that research to then getting to the writing point. And I know as a composer, Alex, you have kind of your style of how you develop and write your score. And then, as a novelist, I have my way in how I develop. So specifically talking about scripts and developing these kind of stories, what is your writing process, and how do you approach doing a script? Have you when did you start writing scripts? How did that all come about for you as a director slash writer?
Gotcha. So basically I just kind of come up with a basic plot, like what is A and what is Z, and then fill the letters in between. Just really basic, like single sentences of like what is happening here. So they're at a bar, they're contemplating the war. Snape shows up. James just gets the idea to attack him, justifies it to his friends. They all agree. They agree to go to a different place and fight. James is losing the fight. James loses the fight, et cetera, et cetera. And then build it up from there. In other words, it becomes more structured as I go along. Like, what are the details in between the basics? My brain just works better that way rather than abstractly just writing and then seeing where it goes. Other filmmakers do it in a very abstract way. So I guess it really depends. But basically also asking, what are my goals for this film? What am I trying to do with it? What do I want to see in it visually? What do I want to achieve as a director? Like, I knew I wanted dramatic moments. I knew I wanted to see if I could get emotionally inducing moments, big action moments, stuff that YouTubers would like, which is big action, as well as doing the characters justice and doing the best I can to understand them, and while at the same time having freedom to try things in this universe that maybe audiences hadn't seen before in the movies anyways. And at the very least, production wise, get it to the caliber of these of the Warner Brothers films.
Which it definitely was, and that's one of the more impressive things about it is the caliber of this film is so good. So Alex, switching to your medium of composing music for films, and in particular something like Snape and the Marauders, how do you approach composing for something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially for one like this, where you're definitely, at least on some level, doing a more traditional kind of film score. It's not, I would say, exactly like John Williams per se. Sort of a little, I don't know, like some sort of a high, well, I guess like me, but like definitely something that's not quite as perfectly magically whimsical, a little darker, a little more brooding potentially, partly just due to the nature of the story. Um, it all comes back to just like the themes. If the person can't, if the person walks away not like humming the themes, I've sort of failed. I feel like, and especially if those themes also aren't impactful and memorable at the same time, like they kind of need to hit both. And so I think I want to say that I did the Snape theme first. I'm pretty certain. And I think I don't think. Now I'm trying to remember. Did I start by playing you the
Yes,
Night
Snape.
theme? I think
Snape theme came up first because we were making a Kickstarter trailer for it.
Right. So so yeah, I did. I thought so. So I did write the Snape theme first, but I think the first cue I played you literally. No. Was it? I might have. Maybe I did the opening credits first, but I feel like one of the very first things I did, I just hit you with the Marauders Unite cue, which barely changed thereafter. Like I think I like killed myself on that cue, the really big fight sequence basically when the Marauders all sort of come together against Snape. Like I went like really into that cue to really flesh out like all the ideas, and that's actually a thing that I had learned from a talk by James Newton Howard at Berkeley. He mentioned that actually what he does is, rather than just scoring chronologically, pick out like one or two of the most key scenes in a film and hit those first, because everything like if those scenes don't work, then a lot of it, the music sometimes can be more ambient and more chill, and so like those scenes aren't going to be as critically important to be effective as these really critical scenes. And so that was sort of my main sort of battle was, I want to make sure like Justin loves this big main theme, this big main moment, and everything else can kind of de-seed from there. And so that was sort of how I did it, kind of just slowly but surely. And I was fortunate enough where I really wanted to go all out with this. Obviously, everybody kind of like really wanted to put all of our efforts into it, even though it wasn't technically like a Warner Brothers production. We wanted to basically be like, no, this is as good as, if not better than anything that they can do. And so like I wanted to get together a bunch of like live players that I was friends with to do like the live flute and live fiddle playing, and live cello. And then for the very end at credits, we actually hired a 65-piece orchestra to record the end credit piece of music, The Storm Arrives, which was really cool. That was a really fun thing. Got to record that by satellite in Budapest, Hungary, which was really fun.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And yeah, it just definitely, again, adds to that caliber of the film. So piggybacking, yes, off of kind of how you approach writing and composing. So we, as authors, we talk often about the dreaded writer's block. And it's one of the most common questions I get when I do panels is, how do you handle writer's block? And of course, it's different when you write for pleasure or for a hobby, and when you have a deadline and you're doing it professionally. So just kind of we'll continue with you, Alex. How do you handle we all have those moments, I guess you would call writer's block. So as a professional who has to work on a deadline, what do you use to get past that?
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned this to Justin, a book I read last year called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
I read that book too. It's a great book.
It changed my entire philosophy about writing in any sense. Like for me, writing music, for you guys writing, words, obviously. Basically, so there's a difference. Obviously, I am a professional film composer, so like I need to have deadlines all the time. I can't necessarily speak to a hobbyist, but I still think the same thing would be if you really like the hobby, I still think it's the same concept, which is like you're there to create something. Like you need to come away with something. It doesn't necessarily have to be the best. You want it to be, but that's not the point. The point is that you're creating, and you can always edit later. You always have to put something on the board. So it's like there's not there. I think how I got rid of writer's block is literally like there's no such thing. Like I can't believe in writer's block. I'm going to produce something. I'm going to call upon whatever is in the ether around me to create something at the end of the day, at the end of the hour. There's not a question now. I think I actually when I was at Berkeley, I interviewed film composers and like certain filmmaking people as part of the film scoring network at Berkeley. And I think actually the last interview I ever did was with Thomas Newman. He did a very brief 30-minute interview. And when someone asked him about writer's block, and he said, you don't talk about it. You just can't, like, it's not a thing. Like, because I think as soon as you think that, it's almost like quicksand. As soon as you're in quicksand, you're just going to go like down from there. And the more you struggle, the more you're going to see. You just kind of have to, a lot of what I do also is like technically, specifically a film scoring point of view, is I set up each cue. I time it out. I mess with the tempo. I mess with the meters. And so like, I know I'm going to hit 3 different hits in this 3-minute cue. So I make sure I line all that stuff up so I know it's going to be hit properly. And then I'll just sort of think to myself, if I really have nothing in my mind, I'm like, okay, I know there's going to be a timpani roll in the hit. So let me just put the timpani roll. I don't have to write anything again. Just slowly, kind of like almost like tricking myself into writing something. This is if I have writer's block, you know, if I actually am having a hard time thinking of something. And then the next thing is sometimes I'll start halfway through a cue. I won't start at the very beginning of the cue. I'll start like in this middle section because I know what to do in the middle section. And then I can kind of build around it. And I don't know if you guys can speak to that with writing, but that's kind of how I've gotten myself now essentially away predominantly 99% of the time from writer's block. Is I just kind of slowly psychologically trick myself into writing the music, whether I want to or not.
I think that's a really good piece of advice. Trick yourself into writing. Be smarter than yourself. So Justin, what's your process for overcoming writer's block?
I never the War of Art too, and it was really, really helpful because it kind of has you attack the problem from a spiritual point of view of being able to open yourself up to basically universal energy and just allow that to come to you, and don't be impatient and don't let emotion get in the way of ideas. But there's a lot of techniques toward getting those ideas to come to you. The first is you don't have to start at the beginning, and that often happens. When I write a story, I want to make sure the beginning and the end are really strong, and then it takes several drafts to get the middle to justify the beginning and the end. Like make sure the end pays off, and everyone is like excited or emotionally driven by the end through the middle. I very often, when I'm trying to come up with stories, I try to have a writing partner because it's just so much easier to run ideas back and forth. In fact, whenever I feel stuck and I just say it out loud and act like someone else is in the room, meaning I'm talking to myself, then the ideas start popping up a lot easier. And I'll also look at it from kind of a problem-solving point of view. Like, what is my problem? The problem is this. Why is it a problem? Well, Lily is having an issue because she's at this place. Okay, how do I solve that? And it's kind of like putting together building blocks or putting together a Tetris. Like, that piece has to go somewhere, and there's only a few places it can go. So if you narrow down the possibilities as to what your story issue is, then that really helps. And if you have a strong narrative theme, like a very basic plot point story of what this needs to be, and then you start to discover what the theme is. So for Severus Snape and the Marauders, Snape needs to apologize to Lily. The conflict is James won't let him because he sees him as a threat, and the theme is the innocence is over for these kids, and they're going to learn the hard way that they have to grow up. When you tackle it from those points of view, then the pieces start to put together for themselves. So almost to the point of where the ideas become cliched in one note, and you're like, nope, that idea is too easy. And so the tough part is what you have to think about new ideas that people haven't seen before. But at the end of the day, when people see the film, they go, that makes sense emotionally, plot-wise, and they're totally on board. So they haven't seen it before, but they can totally relate to it. So that's where the challenge of writing a good story comes in, is trying to get people on board because they haven't read or seen anything like it, but they can still relate to it, and they can still have an emotional impact because it's always touching upon human themes and emotions. So yeah, those are just a few different things walking around, having a writing partner, and not emotionally connecting yourself to how you're going to find the outcome of your obstacle.
And I think you definitely hit the nail on the head, because at the end of the day, we're all storytellers, no matter what medium. It's film, if it's a novel, if it's music score, that we're telling stories. So Alex, for you in particular, how do you feel that you add to the storytelling process by being a composer?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it depends, I guess, on the genre, but a lot of times, especially in dramas, horror films, thrillers especially, there's a psychological element that usually music helps to add sometimes, that the film, although is usually still portraying, there's certain undercurrents that hopefully the music might be sort of adding this extra sort of subliminal layer that maybe the storytelling can't quite even emote. Like that's why the music can basically, it's almost like a different dimension. Obviously, it's almost like it's adding this layer that the actors don't necessarily know how to necessarily pervase in the film, but like there's this constant current maybe going under film that kind of helps build this extra level of emotion might be going on. And then I think, obviously going more towards the traditional route, more the sort of John Williams leitmotif route, with this movie in particular, like it had themes for the characters. So it was, in that sense, actually easier. Sometimes it's hard when you don't have any themes and you're just kind of writing sort of ambient floating music, because it doesn't necessarily have a center of gravity. Whereas it's almost like an assignment. It's almost like a mission, because like in each section of the movie, if a character is talking to another character, like you're going to be dealing with one or more of these people's themes. A theme can be a person. It could be, in the case of the Marauders, all of them together. It could be a concept as well. And so it just depends on what it needs. And so that also just helps dictate technically what theme needs to be where. Obviously, Snape's theme kind of also became sort of the main theme of the film as well, sort of the default nature of it. Also, the short films, there's less time to develop the themes. And that's actually partly leading into the Great Wizarding War. What's nice about the Great Wizarding War is there's now more time to develop those themes, but also even new themes, and just how can I take those themes in different sort of directions, which has been really fun to play with.
Yeah, and that's awesome that you talked about themes, because that was one of the questions I had for you when we get into both of those. So speaking of stories, we'll go ahead and kind of segue into that to Severus Snape and then also the Great Wizarding War. And I'll start for my listeners that are, for some reason, still not familiar with Severus Snape and the Marauders. Hopefully they will be after this. But the description that I had online that I pulled out was basically four friends celebrate at a bar, graduating Hogwarts, and contemplate their future when an old rival arrives. Knowing what side Severus Snape will fight on in the war, James Potter and the Marauders confront Snape for the final time. So that's the description. And I found personally Severus Snape and the Marauders, I just discovered it by accident on YouTube after it had come out. I think there may have been 1 million views at the time that I found it. And now I think it's well over 8 million views on YouTube. And quite frankly, blew me away, especially being the Snape fan that I am. He is definitely my favorite character in the series. I wish I'd known about it sooner. And since then, it's become a staple in my literature and drama classes. And I use it to highlight character arcs and character developments. And also when we talk about Snape as a Byronic hero, because I think what this film and also what the radio play is doing is adding more depth to these characters beyond what we can get even in the book series. So that being said, I want to talk about the characters for a little bit and the development process of these two pieces, and also the casting process a little bit, because I think that the casting was really, really spot on for both of these, starting with Snape and the Marauders. So Justin, what happened with the casting process? How did you come about these main roles of James Potter, the Marauders, and particularly Severus, who carries so much weight in these two pieces?
It was for the most part a pretty traditional casting process. I put out feelers on casting websites that are used commonly in LA, and a bunch of people send headshots, and I pick out the ones that kind of feel like they look the part. And I bring them in for auditions and then callbacks to determine chemistry between the different actors. It was a really fun process because everybody there, almost everybody, are huge Harry Potter fans, and they were super excited to even give it a shot. And I had tons of people, several of which are not actors at all, and I could tell. And that was okay, but the ones that were taken that got the roles not only took it really seriously, but very much understood the characters and very much understood what I was trying to go for with the sides I gave them, because I wanted to make sure that each character stood out with their own issue and their own inner conflict. So when we did especially when we did the callbacks for the guys with the Marauders, and it turned into like an hour-long just play session where I just gave them exercises and they just ran with it, and I was just like, these guys are perfect. These guys are the Marauders, and we've stayed friends ever since, like really close friends. Like I played Dungeons and Dragons right now with Garrett, Zach, and Kevin. That I have to start the next one in an hour. But Mick Morgana Agnes was very special, because I was having a hard time finding a good Snape. Actually, fewer people were auditioning for that role, and that role has a very specific look that is kind of hard to pull off, as well as playing a subdued character that is broody and angry and all kinds of bubbly emotions under the surface that I wanted to portray with him, and also take a slightly different point of view than Alan Rickman, because Alan Rickman played a character in his 30s or 40s. Technically, he's in his early 30s, but Alan Rickman was not in his early 30s. But I wanted to play a teenager. I wanted to make sure that it was a teenager, so there was extra angst and anger that he had a harder time keeping to himself. Mm-hmm. And when Mick auditioned, he did a really great job, and he just slowly but surely showed me that he understood this character, and understood how to get the right balance of broodiness and anger, and then really let that anger out at the right moment, when he started screaming at James and then was about to kill him. So yeah, and I also purposely did not do callbacks with the other actors because I wanted to make sure that the chemistry between James and Snape was as far apart as possible. Mm-hmm. Actually, I did do that is not true. I did do callbacks, but it was less of an intimate affair.
Right. So these characters, they look the part, they sound the part, they're spot on. But then on top of that, as you've already hinted at, Alex, and talked about a moment, the themes are so important. And that was another thing that I think really did set this film apart, was the idea that there were themes in such a short piece, that you were able to establish such distinctive pieces of music for each character. So how is your process when you come up with themes for characters, and deciding how much music you need for a particular character? What is that like in your process?
Not as much necessarily how much music for the characters, but there is a process that me and the director, like Justin, would go through, called spotting, where basically we watch the film together and we're like, where do we think there should be music? Because you can argue that it's actually just as important where there isn't music, because sometimes if you have a film that just has wall-to-wall music, the music becomes less impactful then, because it just sort of floats along like wallpaper. It no longer has those like rises and falls that I think St. Marauders does really well. Because actually very early on, there's just that sort of the cold open, and then there's like no music for the entire bar. Kind of just sets the scene, you're just sort of in the world for a while. And then once you actually go outside and everything, that's then when the music really starts to get going again. But even within that, the fight is really crazy, but then there are parts where it gets much quieter and much sort of darker, and allows the actors to really take a hold of it. And that's one of the things that you don't always have to have, like, as a person's talking, you don't always have to have a theme playing underneath them. that becomes, I think, a little over the top. I think old Hollywood scores used to do that, where they just were playing the theme constantly while the person was talking, which I think becomes slightly obnoxious. And so I think there is a point where you just, now I think modern film scoring has discovered that you can actually let the human voice be actually part of the music, essentially. Essentially, when they're talking, you don't have to have as much orchestration going on. You can kind of just have you could have the chord progressions of the theme, but not the melody itself, and only bring in the melody many times when there's not as much dialogue, where then it would be more impactful. But even if there is talking, you can start to do that. And later on in the film, it gets a little more atonal, a little more kind of like crazy and visceral, but it still kind of comes back to a more centered core by the end of it. But I think the main themes were really the Marauders theme, Snape's theme. Snape's theme kind of like has sort of like a secondary half that actually is, I guess, the back half of it's sort of like Lily's theme in a sense, which becomes more of like a flute instrument, like his instrument. And then you go into instruments. His instrument is cello predominantly. Lily's instrument is flute predominantly. The Marauders are usually like a fiddle, like a violin, kind of when the main sort of like more like really like when the theme really gets fast and going, ostinato strings and everything. But then also occasionally it's also horn, kind of with James, kind of like the horn, like sort of the heroic kind of Gryffindor kind of like thing, a little vibe of that. Horns are brassy, so similar color from the. But yeah, so that it all kind of like part of it just I think psychologically pours into my mind. It's not necessarily that I'm being like that studious about it. I think part of it also just also like locks into place, unconsciously as I go along the process.
Well, you definitely have subconscious stuff going along, because if you listen to Snape and Lily's themes, they actually connect to each other, yet at the same time they feel like they're opposites. But you can listen to them back to back, and you can listen to them at the same time, and they kind of connect. And I remember when we were talking about the Marauders, the literal definition of a marauder is someone who roams around looking for something to steal. And they've been compared to pirates, but on land. And I'm like, well, then let's play around with themes regarding something that sounds similar to Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, I kind of just made it as swashbuckling as I could. That was kind of like what does a land swashbuckler sound like, and that's I think what kind of came out of it.
And that's amazing. And I in my theater classes will play bits of the score, and I ask them just to imagine what they feel happening. They don't know anything about the film, but just what do they feel is happening in this piece of music? And that 99% of the time it's a pirate ship. There's a fight. There's a battle. So it definitely invokes those feelings from people who don't even know anything about the film. So moving to then the Great Wizarding War, which is a completely different medium. Fantastic radio play. But Alex, how is scoring the music for the Great Wizarding War? How has that been different than doing the film?
It's been interesting, but I wish you could talk to Jordan. But I mean, the podcast is definitely much more his. Like he steals the show with the sound. The sound is like just surreal, honestly.
Definitely.
Like, it's a pleasure just to like the first time I listened to an episode, I just kind of sit back and I just kind of like. I just sit there. I just enjoy myself for an afternoon, just kind of soak it in, and then I'll try to be like, okay, where, usually Justin actually knows where the music goes, which is great. He actually kind of pre-spots, like, I think we should have it here and here, and so then I just have to go and check those places and figure out what that needs to be. But yeah, that actually helped a lot. I think if Jordan did not take his game to that level, I think it would have been a little harder, because obviously I'm a film composer, so like I'm predominantly much more like visually inspired. Like I need to see something to have like an image in my head for the music then to be created. So now the sound essentially becomes the picture to a certain extent, and the actors, obviously the voice acting is incredible. And so it's like, it's just doing all of that, they didn't skip a beat, the actors and everything. And so it paints a great world. And I think when the clips are shown on YouTube with some of the fan art, I don't see that. So I only see that after the fact. I wish I could sort of see that, I guess, in conjunction to a certain extent, but I just sort of picture in my head. And since the sound is just so incredible, I can still like kind of feel like, okay, I then had in a way I project my own sort of image. Thankfully we already have images of what they were like on screen, so I can kind of project them into these different places and locations that we all know so well as the story unfolds. And so, kind of just taking it from there, and then just where would the score? How can I now expand the score? Where can I make things more interesting? Still using those themes, but kind of redeveloping them, reharmonizing them. And there are a couple of new themes. Luther has a theme, but that was a fun one to create.
Love his
So
theme.
yeah, his actually, yeah, I think that's like the main new theme. I don't think there's any other new themes, but like that was a really cool one to do. I think the first time it was in episode 2, and then it keeps kind of gets reprised once in a while. But yeah, no, it's been really fun to just sort of take, like I said, it's a more like scoring a TV show. It's like you have a lot more real estate now to develop the theme. It's not like you have 1 minute to do this crazy fight sequence. You have like, I think in episode, what is it, 7? That's like the crazy. That I think that's the one where we did our talk back, and that one I like. Justin just let me rip and just go crazy with the music, which was really fun to do.
Oh yeah, it's definitely been it's nice to just kind of unwind, sit back and just let it all play in your head, which I've really enjoyed. So Justin, give me a little slice of life of bringing this great Wizarding War to fruition. What has this taken? What has this been like to do this radio play?
It's been a lot of fun, and it's taken much more of a backseat compared to Snape and the Marauders because we're just doing it for fun. And I just, someone commented like, "What happened to poor Remus at the end of Snape and the Marauders?" And I was like, "What did happen to Remus? How does that end?" Because there's a very specific way to undo the spell that was put on him, and that I was like, actually, that's good storytelling. The only person who can save him is the guy who cut him. I'm like, how does that happen? Why does that happen? And what happens next? Damn it, I have to write this. but I knew that I was like, Warner Brothers already said he can't raise more money to do this, and if I was going to do a whole series, it would be like 30 grand per episode. It's just, and that even then, it's like, it would have been way more expensive because we would have to do more locations and just get way more ambitious, have a much bigger cast. But at the same time, when I chose the medium as a radio format, it made it so I had a lot more freedom because only the sound was the limit that I had to what I could portray. And well, that has limits too, because I have to be careful about why a sound is where it is, or how the dialogue is written compared to a film where you could use a simple facial gesture to get something across, which doesn't work in a radio play. I just found myself having a lot more freedom. So I could go into Remus changing into a werewolf, running through a suburb street. I could have a big fight. I'm going to have a much bigger fight coming up soon. And I can add totally new characters, and I can just go nuts. So that got me really excited. And also Mick had access to a world-class recording studio that is normally reserved for major bands and groups like the Foo Fighters and REM and all these huge names. But we got access to it for an extremely generous offer. And we were able to bring in the entire cast that was needed for the scenes. And so they were able to still stay in the room and interact with each other. And the really fun part about that is that since these guys are still theater and film actors, they insisted on having some level of physicality with each other. Like they're like, can I please stand next to Garrett, who played James? Mick would ask me. I want to be able to look him in the eye when I'm screaming at him. And there's a fight coming up between James and Snape. It's kind of spoilers, but kind of not. You know it's coming. And they both insisted on actually like standing in front of each other. One person records screaming their heart out while the other person stands in front of them and acts like they're fighting them, and then they'd switch. So that part was just like the most fun of it all. And then when it comes to when we're done recording, I put it all together and I hand it off to Jordan and Alex and let them do the thing. And I just kind of sit back and wait and relax. And it's really nice. It's a little bit less involved. I can just let them loose and let them have their fun. And they get lots of time in between episodes to just chill out. So there's not a lot of like commitment and there's not a lot of pressure, which is the way I wanted it. I wanted it to be a very fun, relaxing exercise that we all just get to do for fun. And I think that's attributed and added to the
the power of the story and the enjoyment that everyone is having behind it.
And does anyone outside of yourself and your co-writer Garrett, I believe, does anyone know what's happening in the next 3 episodes, or do you keep everyone completely in the dark?
Well, Alex doesn't know.
I find out when I listen to the episode. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. So Mick knows. Everybody in the cast knows because we finished recording everything except for like half of episode 11, but they've all read episode 11. We were going to finish recording episode 11 in March, but COVID.
Right.
Yeah, I've been having to slowly slog through episode 10, getting little pickups here and there, which I just finished today. Got the last pickup. It's heading over to Sound and Music now. Yeah. And then I have to figure out how to get the other half of episode 11, which is twice as long as any episode we've done. Because we have a lot to wrap up and finish. And then episode 12 is also done recording. So I'll be basically going backwards just to get it all done. But yeah, it's just me and Garrett and Nick and all the main cast. I kind of told like the Snape and the Marauders crew, because I wanted to pitch it to them of the basics of where things would go, what would happen to the characters to get them excited. Otherwise, no, it's we've been keeping it pretty nicely secret.
Well, I am greatly looking forward to it, especially after episode 9, which definitely left me on the edge of my seat. So I'm very excited for the next 3. And just curious for you guys, I know there's lots of wonderful moments in both Snape and the Marauders and the Wizarding War, but is there kind of a particular moment that you really enjoyed either in the process or just when you were watching it, a favorite moment from either the fan film or the radio play?
I remember Snape and the Marauders had a lot of memorable moments, both joyful and painful. Nothing drama-related painful with Snape and the Marauders. The last day of shooting was heavy downpour rain, so we only were able to shoot for 4 hours out of a 12-hour day. So we had to really push, and I had to cut a lot of shots. And the weather report said we were only going to get 2 hours of shooting, and I was scared out of my mind that we were not going to finish. But we did. And then, but like, it was an incredible bonding experience shooting it, because due to the rain, we were all stuck in a tent, and we were all just hanging out with each other, trading stories, complaining about the food. And even though I tried really hard to get good food, everyone still complained. And then sitting in the edit room is always a blast. Getting every little shot, whenever one shot is finished, I would stop everything and watch it and write notes. And then getting that big piece of the score from Alex, I was expecting to be blown away, but I was also not. I wasn't expecting to be surprised, because there was like a darker tone that I didn't expect that he added when Sirius Black joins in the fight. It starts becoming 2-on-1 and then 3-on-1, and it was almost like the score was trying to tell the audience, like, this shouldn't be happening. This is an action scene that has moral ambiguity behind it, and just shouldn't be happening. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. There's more depth to this action now, and it's made me so happy. And Wizarding War is just, the gang gets back together and has lots of fun, and we get to add lots of people to the gang, and we have lots of fun being there. Alex showed up just to tour the studio, and it happened to be his birthday, so we surprised him with a birthday cake that he couldn't eat.
It's quite memorable.
And then just seeing how just getting back sound from Jordan each episode is always brilliant. Because he doesn't get me anything back until it's just about done. So he always melts my mind with that. And writing with Garrett was really great, because that was the first time I had a serious writing partner. So the collaborations and discoveries we made, as well as the arguments we had about where to go, were intense and amazing and fun, and it was just a deeply ingratiating experience.
Awesome. And do you have any kind of favorite moments, Alex, either that you were involved in or watched?
Yeah. Again, yeah, I think just playing. I think the first major cue, the Marauders Unite cue. I think literally the only thing that was changed was like a tempo adjustment because of I think maybe the edit changed or something between the first time I scored it and the second time. So that was like one of the few cues, which was actually like the most complicated cue, and it like didn't never got it really changed. But I think I spent like a whole I don't know week or something on that one cue for some reason. And it wasn't a long piece of music. It was just, but it was yeah. Um, and because I had also actually been asked by another person uh, in Chicago for the sheet music for Marauders Unite, and I actually went to a performance of it in Chicago, which was really cool a few years ago.
Is that the one that was recorded and on YouTube?
Yeah.
That was mind blowing. I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, it's I think it's like the north side of Chicago. I don't know the name of it's like the #1 public school in Chicago or like in the country or I don't know. But like the girl asked me for the sheet music. Ironically, she had graduated. She was a senior, so by the time that they actually played it, she wasn't even there anymore. But I went there, and it was just kind of like surreal, just having all the kids play the music. I think that's the thing, and then putting together the 65-piece orchestra, like actually orchestrating it with the 65-piece orchestra and videotaping it and everything to show. That was kind of just crazy.
I might have wept when I watched
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
because
well,
I watched it live with you.
yeah. And you even gave the great suggestion that I had in the score, but for some reason the players weren't doing properly, which was at the very end on the last bass note. They're supposed to do it. I guess I probably hadn't added the accent. They're supposed to accent the last note, the dung, for the last deep note. And you actually messaged me like while they were playing, like, Alex, you need to make sure like they hit that last note like you did in the actual, because it was a mixture of like my MIDI temp score and then their orchestra, but I wanted the orchestra to be able to play that properly. And that, because that was an amalgamation of like not only the orchestra, but then also a couple of fiddler friends of mine that I went to college with. They were like these amazing specifically bluegrass fiddle players, because like I knew that they would have the sound, not the clean classical sound, but like again swashbuckling, basically like really like more raw, more gritty of a sound. And so they just immediately, I think I did give them sheet music, but they're the kind of players that they could just hear it and they'll just play it perfectly, because I was just around like bluegrass players all the time, so like that kind of sound, that kind of way that they played the rhythms was like kind of ingrained in my ear. And I just knew that they would be able to do that really well. But yeah, that whole process was just fantastic. And then yeah, I think with Great Wizarding War, I think episode 7, when I just got to kind of like go crazy, that one was really fun, just because it was a big old action scene, and it was just cutting together. I think part of what was fun was really like cutting together, making sure, because one of the things that Justin had mentioned, which was the challenge, which a lot of was honestly handled more by Jordan than me, but was since the fights are taking place in different locations around the area, the music on some level also needed to keep shifting just to kind of keep the pace of where we were. If they were further away from the action, the action shouldn't be as actiony. So there's a period where like it's quieter, where they're all talking to each other, and then when they start running after somebody, it ramps back up again. And you would know that if you're watching it on screen, but just hearing it, you need to be even more. Everything just has to be more. And so that was kind of a fun experience of like, how do you really sell the action and like how to ebb and flow everything properly.
That was tough, transitioning between different locations in a single battle scene with no visuals. That was figuring out how to do that was tough.
I had to listen to it a few times to make sure I knew where everything was. And I'm like, okay, I think I know the blueprint and I can kind of slowly piece it together. But that was another one where I don't think I necessarily scored the beginning of that right off the top. I think I probably started somewhere in the middle, apart like maybe in the middle or the climax, where I'm like, I know exactly how this is going to go, and then kind of again work my way backwards to make sure that it, just like with Justin's screenwriting, that it builds to the ending it deserves, essentially. Like it's not just fluff in the middle. Like everything is there for a reason, hopefully.
Right. That's awesome. And you know that you've had a successful product in this when people have taken it and done other things with it. Just like with Harry Potter, it's got a huge fan fiction community and a cosplay community. And, my little world of TikTok, where I cosplay as Severus Snape. And I've used so much audio and music from these two pieces. And I constantly have people say, what is that? What are those lines? What is that incredible music? And I'm, constantly throwing them towards YouTube moving towards the podcast for that, but it's been enjoyable for me to sort of introduce more people to these two pieces, because I really do think, like we talked before, the caliber of these two pieces is so great and so worthy of anything in the Harry Potter universe. So that is definitely kudos to you guys and to everyone that has been working on this, from Jordan to all the actors that are in it. So before we wrap up with this interview, I really want to know what you guys are also both working on outside of the Harry Potter universe, because of course we love this, but we all have other things that we do. So Alex, we'll start with you. What are you working on now? What do you have in the pipeline for the future?
Yeah, I just got through finishing a couple of feature films. One's kind of like horror thriller, and another one like an adventure comedy, very, very fun one, of another longtime collaborator. He actually took a very long time to edit it, but I'm glad he did because it was fantastic. It was really, really sharp, very funny, really, really, really solid. Very like 80s. It was like an 80s orchestral, tribal, like the score was kind of all over the place, but that was kind of the fun part of it. It was like a very very, very eclectic blend of different instruments. And yeah, I'm about to start scoring another two features, like another horror thriller, and then more of a psychological thriller as well. So yeah.
Awesome. And is there a place where people can follow you or your works that you do on social media or website?
Yeah, probably the best places would be on Instagram at Alexander Arntzen, and then also on SoundCloud at Alexander Arntzen. I think those are probably the best places to kind of keep up with me. I need to probably get better at, but I've been bad at updating on Facebook. I used to update on Facebook all the time, and I kind of just slowly kind of shifted toward more Instagram and kind of that kind of stuff.
That is the correct thing to do.
Sorry, I have feelings about Facebook.
I understand. I agree with you, I'm sure. So Justin, what do you have that you're currently working on, or what's in the future for you?
Well, because of COVID, I've written like 5 different shorts, all like meant to be easy to shoot. I did one where I acted in it, and I was like, that's enough. And
he's good. He is putting himself down. He did a fantastic job.
I appreciate that. And I shot another short last year that Alex scored called Powerless, which is a horror that I'm working on getting funding for feature length. That the goal is to shoot next year. That Alex will also score, God willing. If it goes to Hollywood, then I have no control over who gets hired for different departments, but I get to push whoever I want. But if it's indie, I get to hire whoever I want. So yeah, Alex would be the guy that I would want to be scoring Powerless. So that's a feature-length film I'm trying to get made. That's like my top priority. And yeah, all the other shorts are in varying degrees. One's another horror. One's like a horror comedy, and then one's kind of an abstract sci-fi. And then another one, which I want to shoot with Mick, is a sci-fi thriller. Because he has access to a spaceship. So as soon as COVID, soon as COVID is done, I want to go shoot that with him. And that's pretty much it. I just want to shoot all these shorts. I just bought a nice shiny camera, and hopefully can get a feature film off the ground soon.
Awesome. And where is the best place that people can go to follow you and your work and what's going on?
All the social media is Justin Z Director.
Awesome. So I thank you guys for starting off this sort of Snape and the Marauders segment that I'm going to be doing on the podcast. And hopefully, if all goes according to plan, next week I'm going to be interviewing Madison Brunailer, who plays Narcissa Malfoy in The Great Wizarding War. So we're going to chat some more from an actor standpoint on that. So thank you guys so much for kicking this part of my podcast off. And for my listeners, if you have not done so yet, I don't know what you're waiting for, but please go check out Severus Snape and the Marauders short film on YouTube, and then continue the story with The Great Wizarding War, which I know is on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Is there anywhere else you have it up?
It's trying so hard to get it on Spotify. I've had so many technical issues with that, but yeah, Apple Podcasts is the main one, and YouTube. If you want to see some cool artwork by some amazing volunteers.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining me tonight. It's been interesting and informative as I knew it would be. And again, those of you guys, go follow them, see what they're up to. And I saw the little bit that you had for Powerless, and I'm very interested to see more. That looked incredible. So thank you guys very much.
Thank
And
you.
I hope that you guys have a wonderful evening.
You too, Christy. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I think that's it today, everyone. So thanks for joining me for Quills and Cloaks. And now dry those ink blots and gather your parchments, because class is dismissed.